Et donc on commence par une petite vidéo et après la vidéo, les choses se mettent en place.
EUNICE, the European University for Customized Education, is part of the European Commission's strategy to boost higher education through alliances between universities. After almost 2 years of joint effort, EUNICE has seen the first outcomes of the project. Now the alliance opens its doors to 3 new partners who will help build the new university of the future. Our innovative vision extended to the Polytechnic Institute of Viseu, the University of Karlstad and the University of the Peloponnese. And what does EUNICE offer its students? A virtual campus, a new flexible academic offer, and the possibility to interact with students and professors from other universities. A more inclusive, more international, wider European university. EUNICE is co-creating entirely new study programs at bachelor, master and PhD level. And it already provides training in global competences, languages and a wide range of subjects in English. International, cultural, scientific and sport activities enable us to promote mobility, multilingualism, integration and intercultural knowledge among regions. Events that can, this new academic year, be held in person and will further strengthen the ties between our institutions. Partnerships with companies are another strategic focus of EUNICE, generating new professional development opportunities for students and researchers. Outstanding examples of this are the industrial workshops and the new international internship portal. Additionally, new industrial doctorate and entrepreneurship training programs will soon be launched. In the field of research, EUNICE promotes joint projects by coordinating the R&D resources and agendas of its universities and providing support for the companies, as well as nurturing the abundant talent within the alliance. These actions are reinforced by the activities of the EUNICE Research Project, REUNICE, such as the creation of digital platforms based on the latest technologies, artificial intelligence to connect related research teams, blockchain to publish open research papers, and much more. EUNICE's vocation is to serve its society and therefore seeks key partners among institutions, NGOs, companies and students, creating links in a large community that grows every day for our common goal, to build the University of the Future.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to welcome you this evening, to welcome you who are at present in front of me in this academic room of the University of Mons, but also all the people who are having the opportunity to share with us this evening through their screens and loud speakers, since this evening is transmitted to 10 universities of the EUNICE network, and it will be also at the disposal of the persons who will want to view this evening later on the site of the EUNICE University. Well, this evening is the one when our University of Mons organizes a conference. You know that we are in a series of events within this very special EUNICE week. And here in Mons, we have thought that it could be interesting for the people in Mons, but also for all the people in the network which we are constituting. We have thought that it would be interesting to make the choice of a topic which has become very popular, but that needs probably to be a bit more defined, a bit more explained. Namely, the theme is the one of scientific integrity. Well, scientific integrity are words that we have lots of opportunities to hear or to read in the general press, but also in laboratories, in the boards of scientific journals, and also, they say, in some lawyers' firms, maybe. Clearly, scientific integrity has become a very frequent topic of discussion and of concern of our today's world. However, curiously, if the theme appears to be popular, its precise definition often remains rather obscure for the general public and, I'm afraid, sometimes also for scientists themselves. So what exactly is scientific integrity? Well, there are some ways you can try to approach the concept. For instance, as a matter of fact, most of the time, the term scientific integrity appears when researchers are suspected of misconduct in the course of their scientific work. Were some data faked? Did some conclusions go too far? Are certain statements poorly supported by evidence? Is the researcher really honest since his or her research is supported by a commercial firm interested in the outcomes of the experiments? Are the promoter of that or this idea really the ones who proposed the ideas? Are plagiarisms developing? All questions, as you can see, that are related either to ethical or to deontological issue in research. However, scientific integrity experts say that scientific integrity should not be confused with ethics or deontology. But does this help to define scientific integrity? And what is the scope of scientific integrity? Is it a question of specialists that concerns only those scientists that are researchers? Scientific integrity specialists usually say no. Of course, they believe that if the issue is to be at the forefront of scientific concerns, it plays a fundamental role in the functioning of our societies, and that it must therefore be seen as a subject of paramount importance for citizens and therefore for the policies that serve them. Finally, is scientific integrity a subject for lawyers, for researchers, a concept rather underlying behaviors to be made available to the wide range of citizens? Obviously, in this field, it is easier to ask questions than to find simple answers. Well, so many questions, so many concerns. What to think, what to do? Scientific integrity, so what? Well, as you know, this is precisely the title of the conference we will benefit this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that at this very moment you are experiencing some kind of vertigo about such a wide problematics. Vertigo, you say? Well, best to talk to the doctor. That's why we called Dr. Balériaux. And she was so kind to answer our call and to be our speaker this evening. We are honored, Dr. Balériaux, to welcome you this evening. Thank you for coming to us. Well, I'm a bit kidding, but I must say that Mrs. Balériaux is truly a medical doctor, and more particularly a specialist in neuroradiology. As head of the neuroradiology clinic at the Erasmus Academic Hospital, she has acted as a clinician for many years. She was a pioneer in the use of nuclear magnetic resonance in the neurological clinic, and she developed an intense research activity in this field, which was the occasion of numerous publications in this subject. She is also Professor Emeritus of the Faculty of Medicine of the Free University of Brussels. Moreover, she has been the president of the Belgian Royal Academy of Medicine. She is also a member of the French Society of Radiology and of the Japanese Society of Neuroradiology. But the reason for which we invited her today is that now she is the chair of the Supervisory Committee of the Higher Council for Scientific Integrity of the French-speaking part of the Belgian Kingdom. She is therefore the best person to introduce us to scientific integrity and, I hope, to cure our vertigo. Does Dr. Balériaux please tell us, scientific integrity, so what? Dear Danielle, the floor is up to you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Monsieur Armeni. So, good evening, ladies, gentlemen, friends from Mons and from EUNICE this evening. So, as mentioned, my title expresses already a question: research integrity. Okay. We probably all think we know what that means. But so what? Why should you give a lecture on research integrity? So I will just present to you the overview. Of course, I start with thanking Mons University, Monsieur Armeni, to have invited me to give that lecture. Then I will present myself, but very quickly. We are going to discuss the real topic. What is research integrity? What is misconduct? Is it frequent? Does it matter? What is the impact? Why do the people misconduct? How to prevent? And so immediately a word about EUNICE or EUNICE. I don't know exactly how I should call you. But I had a curiosity just to go and check your websites. And so, dear members, universities from EUNICE, who mentions who mention research integrity on their website. Do you have a research integrity office? Do you comply to the recommendations of the European Union? And I was not surprised, but only one out of all mentions, if I read properly, and please, I apologize if I didn't read well, but I found the information only in one university, and I was not surprised. From what country do you think? Spain, Italy, Germany, French. No, Finland. I was not surprised because the more you go north, the more I noticed that research integrity is handled more seriously. So there is work to do. So who am I to come to speak to you? Well, I have my age. I have been a student, and whilst I was a student, I already did some research in an embryology lab. Then I became a physician. By chance, I became a radiologist, but more than a radiologist, I was mostly interested in neurology. And so I became a neuroradiologist, a teacher, and a clinical researcher. So I love to show you this picture. Yes, I made some research, clinical research. What do you see here? This is a very unique picture I took at the factory of Philips. At the time, Philips developed magnetic resonance imaging. Nobody had really heard about this imaging procedure, and few people like me were willing to go to the factory with patients in my car. Today, what I did would really be considered probably as misconduct, because there were no rules. But at that time, well, life was easier, there was less regulations. Was that well, I really am convinced that I did something well, and I got a lot of experience, not only from a scientific point, but also a humanistic point, to discuss with these patients that were willing to be submitted to a procedure that was quite impressive within a factory that was located 132 kilometers away from my hospital. So should that be still the case? No. And I'm really happy that nowadays research is much better organized and much more overviewed. But what did I want to do? I was searching for the brain. As a radiologist, at the beginning of my career, what I saw was a skull, but where was the inside of the skull? So you must understand my enthusiasm when, for the first time, probably, I have been one of the very first to discover the potential of MR imaging and to visualize the brain. So that was a great experience. And not easy to cheat. I mean, the images were so evident that it was very soon imposing itself as a very standard imaging procedure. But showing the truth is not always easy. I can tell you, I have been with patients to the factory with professors in the college, and when I gave the diagnosis, they were upset and they say it's not possible. I say, but look, the evidence is there. So I have been confronted with the difficulty to speak the truth. Today we speak the truth. We look for the truth, but unfortunately there is a lot of fake information, misinformation, false informations, and this is very bad for the reputation of the science. So how come nowadays I'm involved and I'm talking to you about research integrity? Well, that's a Belgian story. In 2018, I was the president of the Royal Academy for Medicine, and I had a meeting of my Flemish colleagues. And they say, well, what about your research integrity office? I say, we don't have any. The Flemish say, well, yes, we have since 10 years, because we are complying to EU directive, and you should do that. I was very much interested and surprised, and there started the story that many other people like me who are now involved with research integrity are telling the same story. It is difficult to build up an office of research integrity, because what do they say? It's not really frequent. It's obvious that each researcher, each mentor, he acts in a right way. And it's very difficult not to look like a policeman, but just as a person that looks at the reality and say it's bad that we are not more strict with those rules that have been now very well defined. And so COVID experience made also played a role, and it's only in 2021 that officially the Conseil supérieur de l'intégrité scientifique was launched. Since 2 years, we don't have any reaction from all the French-speaking universities or research institutes. They don't have any case of misconduct up till now. This story is the same, and so I decided to have a new symposium at the Royal Academy last month in October. And there we had excellent speakers. This session, you can follow it on YouTube. We heard the history of the French research integrity activities, and we had the chance to have Pierre Gorvol, who is Mr. Research Integrity in France. We had our Flemish colleague and Professor Andrew George from the UK. they all explained how difficult it had been to develop a kind of internal responsibility of the institutions versus the research integrity. So what are we really speaking about? So I tried to find a definition of research integrity. The oldest I found was given by the ORI, its Office of Research Integrity in the US, and this office started in 1989. Their definition mentions fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, the so-called FFP. This we all know. This is clear. But there are other practices that seriously deviate from those that are commonly accepted within the scientific community in the way people are proposing, conducting, reporting their research. Of course, we don't speak about honest errors because these exist. Even Einstein published papers that today have to be reviewed, but it was an honest description of what they had observed. I found another definition. Research integrity means conducting research in such a way that allows others to have confidence, trust in the methods and the findings of the research. So it's both to scientific integrity of the conducted research, but also the professional integrity of all people dealing with research. And then the very, very important key elements that are always mentioned. You should be honest in your research, rigorous, transparent, have an open communication, care for the participants, and you should be accountable for your research. So, research integrity, I found out, concerns finally a lot of more than FFP. There are subtle topics, and you here in the room, you are all dealing with research. You know that sometimes, well, it's difficult. It's not bad, but it's not good. Typically, authorship. I have known that. I was writing a paper, but when I sent it to the publisher, I had to add the names of my mentor who had not been involved at all, and for this friend that was working when I was playing, and the work could be done thanks to this man, so we put his name on the publication. Today, this is no longer possible, but still, there are a lot of research integrity misconduct has to do with authorship. You publish something, but it's not your work, or you just forget some contributors. Then you have this way of make many publications with the same data, but you just take a few less, a few more. There are a lot of misbehavior recently, and I will come back to that with the COVID experience. We have seen very well-known French authors that have been finally that finally have had their publications retracted because it was not scientifically valid reviews, publications. Sometimes you just take some data, you don't take the other. More important, you cannot reproduce the data. You don't keep a logbook in your lab. I found that out. A lot of labs, they just have no logbook. Why should I have? Another very interesting topic that could be the only topic of this talk is the whistleblowers. If some colleague sees a misconduct, is he able to do something? Is he able to openly go somewhere and say, I noticed there's something wrong here, and you are closing the eyes? I read in Le Monde a few days ago that a whistleblower in France, in Paris, finally succeeded to be recognized as somebody that rightly explained that in the morgue the corpses of the dead people were not handled properly. But it took her many years before this typical misconduct was occurring. Another topic is the relation with the press. And how do you communicate with the press? There again, we have had a lot of examples with the COVID situation, COVID-19. So, it's not a new topic, scientific integrity, and already in 2007, the OECD has published guidelines, reports, codes on the best practices for ensuring scientific integrity and preventing misconduct. So this is a too busy slide, but I recommend you to read. This is the European Union publication in 2015, asking, it's a directive that all countries, European countries, in matter of research should be aware and should have officers and should organize their research such as the ALLEA code, the All European Academies code is a very well-known code, should be respected. So what is the impact of, is there an impact? Well, I just mentioned one case that Professor George reminded us, the Wakefield case. In 1998, The Lancet publishes a paper describing 12 cases of autism related to the MMA, mumps, measles, rubella vaccination. From the beginning, this paper was not well accepted, or people had doubts. And so already in 2004, there was a demand that Lancet would retract the paper. They did not. And it's thanks to journalists and other investigations that in 2010 we could finally scientifically demonstrate that this paper was invalid and that the data were not properly analyzed. So Dr. Wakefield was radiated from the Order of Medicine. And finally, the Lancet retracted the paper in 2010. Now, what happens to this gentleman? He's now a very active person in the US, where he recently produced a very well-known movie, Vaxit, and he remains a very active anti-vaccine vaccine activist. So what is the impact of misconduct? This is one example, perhaps the one that is more striking to me, but especially in this COVID situation where the people don't want to be vaccinated because there are those publications that they still believe. So I spoke about COVID-19 as early as in April 2002. There was a statement published saying that we understand how it's an emergency to work and to understand this pandemic. And many researchers have been working day and night to understand, to prepare a vaccine. But unfortunately, a lot of papers have been published too quickly. And the conclusions were not always very solid and valid. So we have to remain, excuse me, very honest, and we should avoid poorly designed studies. And they appeared in the literature very quickly. So only this I would recommend you. It's in blue, but there is a famous site, retractionwatch.com. I recommend you to see. Among the COVID-19 papers, already 267 papers have been retracted. 15 are listed as having concern. So the question, how frequent finally is misconduct? And misconduct is extremely deplorable. It's a pity because it's only a minor number of authors that do have a misconduct, but those few will give a very bad opinion in the public about the science. So a few data PubMed between 1973 and 2012 retracted 2,047 articles for what? For misconduct, for fraud, for duplication, for plagiarism. Imperial College, almost the same number. And I'd like to mention this article I found interesting because they reviewed a high number of publications and cases, and the question was how many scientists fabricate and falsify research. And there they excluded plagiarism. But you see that if you consider 2%, it's probably more. But between 1.5 and 2% of scientists are responsible for severe misconduct. And when you ask the researchers, do you know about your colleagues? There, the number are rising interestingly. So the real question is why do the people misconduct? How to avoid misconduct finally? So, because, why would you have this misconduct? So one of the major reasons that are mentioned is the pressure to the researcher from the industry, from their mentor, from those who give the money for their research. They ask, publish or you perish. Sometimes there are conflicts of interest, and the researchers are pushed to publish something that is perhaps a little bit debatable. And then I'm sure there is also a lack of awareness of this code of research integrity. And their education is the key. When you ask young researchers, do you know what it is? How do you feel? They usually don't answer very well. So education is, in my eyes, certainly one of the most important things to organize and also to control the work of the scientists. And it's interesting to know that, for example, in the US, you don't get any money, you don't get grants if you didn't pass and didn't follow research integrity programs. And I know, for example, in Germany, that no PhD student will start a research without having followed a program, teaching a form of education. So there are other ways to check on the work, and recently I've been informed in detail that when you perform clinical trials today, there is a data bank of privately and publicly funded clinical studies conducted around the world. So if you want to perform a clinical study, you have to make sure, number one, that you are not going to do a study that has already been made. You have to be registered, you have to be educated to perform this study, and moreover, you have to report on your research, even if your research was not positive. Negative results are interested in the same way. So there is the European Union Drug Regulating Authorities Clinical Trials, EUDRA-CT, is a European clinical trials database of all clinical trials of investigational products with at least one site in the EU. So again, those initiatives have been established, and I must say the EU has been very active to support and research integrity organism. So I will end with saying that today, yes, there are a lot of institutions. The most well-known to me is this ORI, Office of Research Integrity in the US, the UK RIO, all those listed there have their website, and they do have enormous information about the rules, about the examples, about the misconducts, and it's really very interesting to visit those institutions. So I hope I was not boring, and I will just conclude that I hope that I have shared with you not my enthusiasm, because it's not the right word, but I realized by coincidence finally how much today, even more, misconduct is possible. 200, 300 years ago, you were burning researchers because they were telling the truth. I'm speaking about Giordano Bruno, who was burned in Rome because he said that the Earth is not in the middle of the universe. Now we have another problem, is we are producing, we are working a lot, but in order to keep the reputation of the science, it's mandatory that we have to follow and to respect those rules that nowadays are really well explained, well documented, and today a lot of educational programs in different countries are available, and really I think every research, but also the mentors, because it's not only the research in misconduct. You have to admit that there are cases, there are problems in relationship between the mentor and the student that creates a relationship that is not positive for good research. So with this, I thank you for your attention, and I would be much happy to answer your questions, realizing that a number of subjects I just mentioned very briefly could be topics for another lecture. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Balériaux. So now we have some time for questions, and I will give the opportunity to the audience which is physically present here in Mons to ask questions, and alternatively people who are connected and who are remote, and people who are here in this room. So we will begin with the people physically present in Mons, and I thank you, my colleague Ronnie Snyders, to give the microphone to the people who want to ask a question. For I would say deontological reasons, people will stay at the place where they are sitting, not to interfere with their right to image, since this is filmed, but Madame Balériaux and I do accept to be filmed, and we don't want to presuppose anything about the people in the room. So
I can start.
My colleague Céline Tilou.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Dr. Balériaux, for this very interesting speech. I have a quite general question for you. You mentioned at several times the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. I'm pretty sure researchers in this room have never read the Code of Conduct for Research Integrity themselves. They are researchers. Please tell me who read one? No? No. So it's very, it's not known at all. So what is your advice to make this Code of Conduct more popular for researchers and even for young researchers? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I can only say I support this proposal largely. The other question, I don't think it's a question. Or I did not understand it was a question.
Okay, sorry. I am asking, what is your advice to make the European Code of Conduct more popular for young researchers?
Yes.
Is it to get a mandatory training at their arrival at the university, for example? Or, I don't know. What is your advice?
Yes, yes. I think nowadays researchers have more and more paperwork. They have more and more regulations to follow, to know, to comply, to... and so one objection I receive is, oh, not one more teaching, not one more obligation. Oh, it's obvious you have, you know, it's not that important. No, I think we must oblige, like it's in the US, it's like this in Germany, it will become like this everywhere. But will that help? There are papers now that I have read saying that teaching won't change much. On what base they say that, I don't know. But I think it's better than not. They say they forget, they pass, they take an exam, and then they forget the rules. I think it's a bit childish to say that. I would recommend something that is not a 35 course and 35 sessions of experiences. I have been to some of those, for example, the whistleblowers. What should you do? What would you do in this example? I think the most interesting is not so much the theory, but to force the people to live some situations with a mentor, with a teacher, and make him feeling where there is a problem and what you should not do. And then ask the researchers, what did you experience? And then they speak up. And then they start to explain on what kind of influence they are and on what they are forced. But they are not always aware, or they think, okay, I'm doing my thesis and then I have my paper, I go. I would recommend it's just mandatory, but something in Belgium that would be national or that would be inter-universities, something that is not too heavy, but theoretical, and a few exercises, practical, just to make them feel where there is a problem. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I totally agree with you with the more practice on research integrity. There's an app on smartphones called the Dilemma Game with a lot of exercise for research integrity. So maybe let's have a try for everybody.
Thank you. Now I think that we have a question from, I will say, outside, so from the network, and Professor Snyders will ask the question.
Yes, so the idea is to alternate between question in the room and question from the web. And the first question from the web is coming from Finland, without surprise. It's coming from Vasa University. Lens to read it. How will the increasing popularity of open journal and fraudulent journal affect the integrity of research, and do you have any idea to mitigate it?
Obviously, this was a topic that I omitted, and I apologize, but I had prepared a discussion about the responsibility of the publishing, thoughts about open science, thoughts about predatory, so-called predatory publishers, publishing where you have to pay to be published. So that's a very difficult question. There is no definite answer in my mind, but during our Congress last month, we had asked editors-in-chief to ask how they could detect papers that were dishonest or that were not in accordance with the rules of scientific integrity, and the role of the peer review. How do you review a paper? It takes a lot of time, a lot of experience. How can you check the data and so on? It's a topic on its own, the publishing world. And at the same time, I feel happy about the idea of the open science, that science would be available for everybody and that you should not pay for it. When I was young, I had to pay if I wanted to have a journal. Not all the journals were available. And I used to teach in China. I took books with me. I took journals because they didn't have. So I'm very happy that today the science is more publicly available, but it must be good science.
Thank you.
I hope I answer, but perhaps you have some comment on that.
Later on, because I've seen a hand which was raised, Professor Müller, I believe you asked, or maybe not. I'm sorry, I just misidentified my colleagues.
So thank you for your talk. I will have two questions. I will just start with one and keep the second for a bit later on. In all the examples you pointed out misconduct in medicine and clinical trials. Maybe first question, is it just because that's your research field and then you have probably a better understanding of what's happening?
No, so good question, and indeed, I like to speak about what I know, or I don't, that I know the least badly, but I should have said that those rules apply for much more than the medical world. Plagiarism, authorship, all this happens in every research work, and all those rules are not at all specific for the medical world. Unfortunately, again, my colleagues from the other science, social science, literature, all the members of the academy. It's not only the Royal Medical Academy that decided to put together this commission, this council on integrity, but they are not very active, I must say. So it's, yes, it applies to everything, and perhaps you know better because you are not specific medical.
No, I think it's very important to to remind that scientific integrity is universal, and the questions that are addressed and the answer that may be given are the same for all the disciplines. Which is not true, probably, for ethics and for deontology. And that's a point of differentiation between scientific integrity and those other topics which are very often confused with that. We have the great chance here in French-speaking Belgium that the Royal Academy of Medicine has accepted to be the host of our higher council for scientific integrity, but it doesn't mean that there is a special, unique, preferential focus on research in medicine. And some of the examples that Professor Balériaux has given, for instance, that psychologists and other researchers in social sciences whose papers have been retracted as a mass event, I would say, are good example that it is very transversal. But I'm not here to make a conference.
There was a second question.
I think that you have a second question.
Maybe the second part of my question. It seems that there is an increasing rate of these misconduct behaviors. And my question is that, is there any correlation between the topic in which these misconducts are observed and the money that is put for the research in these topics?
First, an answer and a point that I didn't make is that today misconduct is much easier to do, whatever the scientific field, because of the fact that we are living in a digital world. And so fabrication, falsification, copying is much more easy. Now, in the money, evidently, this plays more a role probably in the medical world than, I don't know, literature or other fields of research. But I have no data about it. It's just the power of the industry But I know today I've been discussing with great pharmaceutical industries. They have set up programs and procedures to avoid the pressure of money, they must do research, but they work on the fact that researchers must remain independent and that they must remain free to choose their topic. It's perhaps wishful thinking, but I was impressed by the procedures I've seen and have been mentioned to me.
Okay, thank you for the questions and the answers. Do we have still a question in the room? Yes, please.
Thank you, Danielle. It's nice to see you in Mons. So you might just a little reminder, since you and I are from the MRI world, you probably remember that one of the first scientific misconduct was done by a commercial company which produced an image of a supposed living person to show the quality of the image, and this person was dead. So that was one of the most shocking to me. Now, I go to my question. We could talk, I think, hours and hours. I think the reasons for misconduct is first the pressure on the, as you said, the pressure on the researchers. And the pressure from the mentor can be seen as a kind of scientific harassment. The second point is the problem of the publishers. This is exactly what you said. The publishers are making money with the work of scientists, and they are pushing scientists to publish, and they basically offer them to publish against money. You pay for the paper, your paper will be published, and since you pay, your paper has little chance to be rejected. So, and now my question is, what is the role, the precise role of these integrity offices? Because to try to prevent scientific misconduct is something, do they also enforce misconduct?
So that's another important topic. How do you condemn? How do you punish? Who is doing that? So all the officers I mentioned, they recommend that handling these cases must be done by the institutions where the people work. But if the people are not happy with the conclusions, if one of the partners disagree with the conclusions or with the sanctions, it's important, and that's what happens, at least in Belgium, that one of the partners can ask the opinion of the office. The office will not, they will just give an opinion, but they will not impose a sanction. But the fact that this exists already has changed the mentality within the research institutions. Up till now, all those misconduct cases were more or less, don't speak, we don't have, we clean our house in-house. And to know that if the cleaning procedure is not just or that may happen. It's important that there is a possibility to go to an office and say, here, it's not true. You see, that's the only thing we can do. But in the US, there are penal cases. To my knowledge, in Belgium, we are not able to punish. We are just able to do a statement that goes back to the university, and that is completely anonymous. I mean, it's, of course, the members of the commission know, but they will handle the case, but it will not be publicized, it will not be publicly advertised.
Please, could you use the microphone, because people in the 9 other universities want to hear you.
How many cases did you have to look at?
So we founded in 2021, we have 0 cases. But the Flemish part that is working since almost 10 years, they have every year, and in Flanders, you know that there are about 6 million inhabitants. They have 8 to 10 cases a year. But and then, as I mentioned, I'm going to the NGO meetings, and that was a question. And the other countries said, in the beginning we didn't have many cases, but all of a sudden the cases have been appearing. The problem is to know that it exists. I've attended a meeting where we gave prizes to researchers. I did ask individually to every researcher, have you heard about the Commission of Research Integrity? What is this? We don't know. I have asked all the Belgian French-speaking universities to make just clear, if you have a problem that is dealing with research integrity, you can go to this office, you can enter this form, you can do this. It's all. It's not difficult. It doesn't happen. And Bernard and I, we go visit universities, talk to the rectors, ask, please make it more visible. And sometimes I've heard, oh, but I had a case of fabrication, and the researcher was kicked out, but the unions were against it. Okay, that's not a joke. So it's going slowly. It's a question of mentality. It's a question of honesty. It's a question of rigor in a society. And that's why I feel in the Netherlands they are much more advanced. In Germany, in Finland, they are much more active. In Ireland, it's a question of culture. But I really don't want to act as a policeman. I don't want to act as, I just want to say, please be aware that the climate in a research group can become very bad because of this and this. I think it's much better. Now it's clear we are going to do this research and the publication will have this and this and this name from the beginning. And there is an entire culture to teach to the researchers. I hope I answer. I hope in 10 years it will be normal to have those institutions that just want to defend the science and how reliable science is. We have had really bad time with this COVID period because we had many experts, and you could say whatever you wanted. And it has an impact on the population that doesn't want to be vaccinated, that doesn't trust. Science is no longer trusted, and that's our fault. So, and the press exaggerates, as you know. Bad news is good news for the media. Good news is no news. So you only read about the bad things. That's another debate.
I don't want to be long. Just one point again against the publishers. COVID. How many papers have been accepted the day they have been received by the journal? This is the proof that they have no ethics, most of them. And what is the value of those papers? Who knows?
Who knows could be a good conclusion for this evening. I realize that time has almost elapsed. I don't know, Ronnie, if we still have some question from the network.
I have one for myself.
Okay, please.
Yes, basically, Robert just tried to find the origin of this behavior of such a researcher. It can be publisher, can be also the pressure of the mentor, that could be the origin. But if you go further in this analysis, basically it seems that it's also the system itself which can be the origin of this behavior. Because when you think about it, the system kind of put a pressure on the researcher to generate publication. Why do they have to do that? Just to make money, because when you are evaluated in a committee, most of the time the first criteria is age factor. So if it is this element which remain the key element when you analyze a proposal, when you analyze a career trajectory to give promotion, etc., of course it implies that researcher will probably go to this direction. So the question is, to which extent, to your opinion, it is the case, and do you think that such a kind of integrity office could make pressure on the higher level, which in fact decides the procedure for selection, etc., to change, in fact, this criteria?
So I don't think it's one commission. I think it's really the work of these groups. This NGO, but there are other groups funded by the EU. I'm sorry I didn't mention them, but if you go on the internet, you will see a lot. And those groups that are international or worldwide can have a pressure. Or they discuss this and they want to change it. It's not just the small French-speaking commission that will change the publishers' world, but I think it's all together. And it's a topic that is discussed. How can we work on that? How can we press on the publication world?
Okay.
Maybe just one additional comment to answer the question of Ronnie. For sure, the system is a kind of virtuous circle for this research integrity. That's why on the European Commission on July 22, so a few months ago, they mentioned a huge guide for research assessment in order to assess researchers based on other criteria, indicators, more than quantitative indicators, or more qualitative indicators. And we have now a route to change the way we assess researchers in order to move this pressure on other shoulders.
Yes, at our meeting, we had invited the FNRS, which is one of the major funding organisms, and we have asked them, how do you evaluate what are the procedures and how can you make it more realistic, or not just linked to an H index or so on. So they are working on that too.
Any more questions? Yes, I see.
Okay. So maybe just one comment coming back on the remarks Professor Müller did a couple of minutes ago. I remember I had a discussion with an American colleague about 20 years ago, and we were discussing about the fact that a non-negligible part of papers published in physical review letters seems to say afterwards, okay, this is not so correct about that. And he said to me at that time, it's worse to be second than to be wrong. So that's the first point. The second one, I want to be optimistic concerning the third line from the bottom of your slide about education. We have a series of courses about soft skills. And in these, with my colleagues from the medicine faculty, we are doing things about bibliographic searches, plagiarism detection, the mechanism of peer reviewing to explain to the students what we are doing. If I have 30 minutes to explain to the students about these things, what should I do? What should I put in front of my discourse?
You know, I'm not used to give lessons to people. I think the best thing, like I try to explain, is to make them feeling the impact themselves. You know, if you tell a child he should not cross the road, he will probably cross the road. But if you explain and why it's dangerous to cross the road without and so on, and let him, you know, independently think about the subject, I think that's the best way to teach. And so education, we have been speaking about education of PhD students, but should we not have this education much earlier, even at school, or when you start medicine, or when you start a scientific curriculum? At what time should you be? I don't know if I answer your question. The publisher world is a world that I have a bit lost, I must say. I was a reviewer for several journals, but I don't know how it goes in other journals, but I know it's a very time-consuming. We think about paying the reviewers. I think it takes your time, And whilst you do that, you work for a journal. You work for the science. Who should pay for that time? I think that's a question. And to choose the proper reviewers.
Saying that obviously Professor Balériaux has shown this evening how wide is the framework that the questions about scientific integrity enable us to see and try to grasp. I began saying maybe you feel some vertigo. I don't know if you feel better at the moment, but if you feel much more vertigo, be quiet. It's normal. It's normal because it's really the functioning of science, evaluating researcher, diffusing the results of the research, verifying the correctness of the scientific work. All those things are basic in science, and we can see that. The issue of scientific integrity is present all the time. I think that education on the one hand and evaluation of researchers on the other hand are probably the first two key issues that should be taken into account, because if you raise the new researchers saying them that they have to publish few but to publish well, if you tell them that they have to be very honest with the data, not hiding a part and then publishing it later on, of course you will give them very bad advice for their career if the career is still functioning as it is in too much places now. So I think that we see very clearly, thanks to Professor Balériaux, that those questions are really the first one to be taken into account. I think also that the conference by Danielle show us that we need to share ideas. We need to discuss one with another between scientists, of course, but very often we, the scientists, we don't have time for those kind of bizarre discussions. So it's important that we are able to find time for that, because it will be a very basic problematics. And also it's important that the people who are not at all scientists and who finally do get the benefits of research, be also very well informed. It would be a pity if the usual citizen would be quite afraid of researchers because they think that researchers are not very honest. Just have a look to the social networks when scientists try to say something in some networks. Very often you see people saying, well, he's not honest, she's not honest, she has been paid, he has been paid by a medical firm or things like that. So I think that there is really a democratic issue which is underlined by the question about scientific integrity, and I would like really to thank Professor Balériaux to have put all that ideas in a very clear structure. I think that the plan of her conference is really something that can help us to think about scientific integrity. It's a kind of a guideline. At any rate, I will keep it and remember it like that, Danielle. And I hope that this is not the end of our discussion and reflection about scientific integrity, but it is the beginning. So it's my personal wish, and I think that if we all do that, we will have many thanks to address to Danielle. Thank you very much, Danielle, and thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Well, to all the attendees here in Mons and also in the 9 other universities, thank you very much for having attended this conference. And I hope that we will be able to discuss furthermore about that. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.